What I'm about to show you is how I get extremely accurate sketches using grids. So let's get straight to it. So the first task is to find an image, and this can be literally anything. I then print the image out in black and white and remove the white borders using a crafting knife or a pair of scissors. I now need to split the image into 64 even boxes. So ensuring that the 0 is flush with one end, I measure the length of the image. I then divide this value by 2 to find the midpoint of the length. And I do the exact same thing at the top of the image. I then mark the midpoint between the edge and the actual midpoint. To work this out, I did the total length divided by 4. I then have to split it again by dividing the length by 8. So I first of all need to line the ruler up with the edge, mark 3.6 from there, move it to the 1/4 line, mark 3.6 from there, move it to the halfway point, mark 3.6 from there, move it to the 3/4 point, mark 3.6 from there, and then you're done and need to go and do the same to the top. I then split the width in the exact same way as we just did with the length. Now in terms of materials to use to do the grid, I wouldn't necessarily recommend a pencil, however it will still work. But what you should definitely not use is something like a Sharpie, which is a line that's really thick and can genuinely hide details behind itself. I now put the image on the piece of paper I'm going to be working on, in the place that I want the subject to be. I then mark in all the corners and where all the grid lines need to be, and I make sure to use a little dot so it's nice and precise for exactly where it needs to be. You now just need to go and connect all the dots, and you have a grid on your piece of paper that's identical to the one that's on your reference image. When drawing grids, I would highly recommend that you hold the pencil quite high up, so you have like very little pressure down on the graphite so that the lines are nice and faint and easily erasable. Because at the end of the day, you don't necessarily want them showing through in the final piece. But let's say you want to go a bit bigger, for instance, A3. This will require a couple of calculations. So we know that an A3 piece of paper is 29.7 centimeters by 42 centimeters, and that our reference is 14.5 centimeters by 28.8 centimeters. We can then work out how many times bigger the dimensions of the A3 paper are in comparison to our reference image. To do this, we can divide the width and height of the A3 paper by the width and height of our reference image. Now the smaller number represents the maximum times bigger that our image can be. For instance, if we were to go 2.05 times bigger, the length would end up going off the page. Now the new length covers the entire 42 centimeters of the A3 piece of paper. However, the width won't cover the whole 29.7. We have to work this out. And to do this, we times the length of the reference image times the new multiplier, which is the 1.46, to give us 21.1. So the box I'll draw on the A3 paper will have these dimensions. To ensure the box is in the middle, we need to take away the total width of the A3 paper minus our new width. We then divide this by 2, which will give us the total length that we need to take away from the top and the bottom to ensure that our box is in the middle. I'll also put a mark in the middle at 4.1 centimeters, just because the thing I'm using to draw the lines doesn't actually reach all the way from one end to the other. And by taking 4.1 centimeters from each side, it means that the box in the middle is 21.17 centimeters. And just as with the A4, I split this box into 64 even boxes. So that's how to make a grid with the same width and height ratios as your reference image. Now, back to the A4. Before transferring anything, I like to just mark out all the points of intersection between the subject behind the grid and the grid lines. I then measure how far away each of these points are from one of the lines on the grid. I then move over to the piece of paper I'm working from and mark it in the corresponding place. Now if you are working on something bigger, for instance on our A3, then you have to times this distance by 1.46, or the multiplier that you come up with, and then plot this point in the corresponding place instead. You then continue this process until you put all the points from the reference image to the piece of paper. So what you have now is pretty much a dot to dot on steroids. So how I like to approach this is to first focus on the bigger shapes. And looking at your reference image to do this is vital. I pretty much don't go about 20 seconds without looking back at my reference image to ensure that what I'm putting on the paper is exactly what is in the reference image. And being honest, initially this will look a bit pants. However, if you keep putting more lines down, this will provide more reference points for where other lines need to go, and in theory it should get easier. Now I say in theory, because I mean, yes, you have broken the image up using grids and also provided lots of reference points with the whole dot to dot system. However, this is still pretty hard and requires a lot of practice to get good at it. A helpful tip for the more detailed areas is to split the boxes up again. This will provide more points of reference in order to help you visualize the area a lot better. So there you go. This is my exact method I use for all my drawings in order to get super accurate sketches. And if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time with more creative content.